Welcome. My name is Matt Paul. I'm the pastor at First Presbyterian Church here in Port Angeles, and we're delighted to have you with us for a series of conversations on the correlation between mental illness, homelessness, and criminal justice. The topic kind of arose as part of our Christian Formation Committee, and as actually I think Don had the idea that got us conversing with one another. And it was really timely for us. Our church is located on 8th Street, and we have homeless people they're our neighbors. And whether that's true, whether they're right by where we live or our houses of worship are, or where we work, but in our community. And so we wanted to invite some people in our community to talk on these subjects, and this is really, we're hoping, would be a time for us to listen, to learn, and kind of explore, maybe complexify some things a little bit, maybe dispel some notions that we might have that are not accurate. Open us with a word of prayer, and I'll turn it over to Nancy Jacobson, who will introduce our guests tonight. Let's pray. Well, gracious and loving God, we thank you for this opportunity to listen and to learn. And I pray that in this time we would grow our hearts toward our neighbors, that we would have an understanding of the plight and struggle of our neighbors and what we can do to help. And so we ask your guidance for our time tonight. In your name we pray. Amen. Nancy?
Yes, I'm Nancy Jacobson, and at one time I worked with the homeless population through Serenity House. And so I have, I walk down the streets of Port Angeles and I say hi to a lot of people that unfortunately are still on the streets. And it's been a few years since I worked with homeless population. A couple of us started family shelter through Serenity House, where families could be housed as opposed to single adults. So there's a lot of resources in our community, and tonight we'll start with two of those. We want to explore several different aspects of homelessness, and you will be able to ask your questions pretty soon. But maybe some of you saw in the paper yesterday and today the moving buildings that were coming through Port Angeles on their way to Forks. Those moving buildings are part of Sarge's Place, which is for the homeless population of veterans. There's a substantial number of those folks that live in the Forks area, and they have put together some temporary housing just for homeless vets. I was shocked to find out on a trip to Forks that at one time on the left-hand side of 101, there were large piles of debris, trees that had been cut down, trimmings, and they looked like great big hill stacks. I was shocked to discover that homeless vets were living in those. That was their shelter. Why would homeless vets be a prevalent part of our community? We're not exactly going to be talking about Forks and the aspects of the veterans, but there is a lot of work being done in that area as well. So tonight we have two guests with us. We have Sandra Allen, who works with Peninsula Behavioral Health, and she is in charge of two programs there that we'll be talking about. And then we also have Joe Descala. There he is, waving at us. Joe is kind of on his own with a group of volunteers that we'll hear about in a little bit. So Sandra, I'm going to start with you. It's good to finally see you. We've been emailing and whatever. So it's good to finally meet you.
Yeah, same to you, Nancy. And
so go ahead.
It's hard on Zoom. It's like, wait, do I talk? Is she talking? I was just going to start off by saying thank you to everyone for being here tonight. And thank you to Nancy and the First Presbyterian Church for inviting me here to speak on homelessness and mental health in our community. And, I have a few things to say, and then I'll be available for questions, and we can kind of let the conversation happen organically. I'll also chat a little bit about the programs that Peninsula Behavioral Health offers, specifically the outreach programs that I supervise. So yeah, that's just kind of what I had in mind. And what did you want to say, Nancy?
Nope, you're headed in the right direction. I was going to ask you about your two programs and ask you to tell us a little bit about that and what kind of success you're having. What do you use for a measure of that success? So go for it.
Okay, so homelessness is, a cause of mental health issues, but it's also a consequence of mental health issues. So they're very closely entwined. And, homelessness is also a barrier for folks to access mental health services and get the help that they need. When you're living on the streets or in places not meant for habitation, it's difficult to stay connected because you don't have a solid support network. Most often these folks don't have a phone that, they can get their appointment reminder calls on, which we all love. They don't have an email that they can get into. They are in survival mode. And so when you're in survival mode, your executive functioning part of your brain doesn't work properly. So they're just thinking about how they're going to get their next meal, how they're going to stay warm, where they're going to sleep, if they are going to sleep, how they're going to be safe. And it's really, really challenging when you're in that survival mode to think about, going to see your therapist and setting goals and working on goals or getting your meds, or even keeping track of your meds for that fact. People are getting robbed on the street, they get stolen from, they don't have a safe place to keep their possessions. And they're constantly getting re-traumatized out there. And so the trauma compounds trauma. And, it just continues to amplify mental health issues, which it makes it really hard for them. So what we do at Peninsula Behavioral Health, we have a number of different programs, but the two programs that I oversee are the PATH program and the Real Team program. And both of them are acronyms. And PATH stands for the Project to Assist in Transition from Homelessness. And REAL stands for Recovery, Empowerment, Advocacy, and Linkage. And so, they're very similar in a sense that the goal is the same, is that it's to provide support to individuals who don't have those natural support systems in place and connect them with services that they need, such as behavioral health or substance use treatment and housing. But a lot goes into that, because if you aren't, I like to use the phone as an example. We all have our cell phones or our computers, and we stay connected that way. And if you're living in a tent, you don't have a way to charge your phone, if you do have one, and you can't keep track of things. You can't make phone calls regularly to check in. And so when we try to connect people to mental health services and substance use services, we try to look at what are the barriers and, address those items as well. So whether it's getting your ID, getting a phone, getting some food, getting a blanket, getting warm clothes, shoes, maybe getting an umbrella to stay dry. It's the littlest things to the biggest things is what we cover. And all of our folks that are employed under both of those programs are what we call peers, and they have lived experience and are either in recovery from a mental health illness or a substance use illness. And most of them have lived experience with housing insecurities as well. So we use our lived experience to build rapport and trust with the folks that are currently out there living on the street, coming from a place of compassion and just I've been there. I know what you're feeling and what you're dealing with. And that helps build the trust and rapport to kind of encourage the connection to the services. And we're there walking alongside them throughout that entire process, helping them get to the appointments. We go and pick people up and drop them off, and then we take them back to where they need to go. And whether it's a doctor's appointment, a housing resource center appointment, going to get a drug and alcohol assessment, go into the grocery store, going to take a shower somewhere, go into the laundromat. It just really varies depending on the person's need. And the programs are designed that way so that there is a lot of flexibility to meet people where they're at and provide the services that they need specifically. So the real team, am I going too fast? Do you guys want me to stop and do questions maybe? I know I've unloaded a lot.
No questions now.
Okay.
Keep talking.
Okay. Sometimes I just get on a reel and I just go, and then I'm like, whoa, maybe I should slow down. Our outreach teams are out in the community on a daily basis. We spend 70% of our time out in the community. And that looks like, hosting a shower service at our Horizon Day Center, some mornings, being at Peabody Laundromat every Thursday for the morning, bringing our quarters and our laundry so people can just come, connect with us, chit chat, get that peer support that they may need. It's a relationship builder as well as an outreach service. For example, I don't do the laundry service every week, but when I was there, maybe 5 different people that I've been working on stuff with came in, and I was like, oh, hey, it's good to see you. Where have you been? And then we start talking about some things that we maybe were working on the last time I saw them. And they're like, yeah, I've been meaning to come in and talk to you, but I just haven't made it in there. And I really want to work on this. And I really need your help with getting my ID, and it's a chance for us to reconnect as well as build new relationships. So it's just really great to be out there in the community, available for when they need us, because it's hard for them to come into the office. Sometimes it's just like a huge barrier. They don't want to walk in those doors. So if we can be out there with them, it helps make that connection. And it might take like 25 times where I see somebody and give them a cup of coffee and we have a conversation. And then on that 26th time, they're ready to, go to treatment. And it's like, let's do it. They're ready to trust you and get connected and do it. And when they're ready, it's important that they know someone that they can call or that they can find, or where to find us. We're at the Salvation Army serving meals. We do lunches at the tree park. We're just we're at the shelter connecting with folks. I just walk around and talk to people and ask them how they're doing and just start a conversation. We do outreach in the mornings, just walking around on the streets, checking in with folks, knocking on car windows where we can tell that people maybe been sleeping in their car, hiking into different encampment areas that we know are popular spots where people might have a tent or something. So that's kind of what our services look like. And the goal is to just have that relationship building component and eventually connect them to the services and help them stay connected. That's a big piece too. Once you get them connected, your job is not over. It's like, okay, we've got, that big piece done, but let's make sure you're staying connected. So yeah, I think that's all for my spiel.
Okay.
That's all that's going on in my head right now, Nancy.
Thanks, Sandra. We're going to go to Joe, and then we'll come back to both of you with some group questions.
Wonderful.
Okay. Joe,
Yeah.
You said a great biography or autobiography. But I'm going to ask you quickly.
Yes.
How did you get involved with the homeless?
Quickly. Wow. So
I'll give
I
you
am
2 minutes.
Yeah. So I'm a former pastor here in town. I used to be an associate up at the Assemblies of God Church, and then I planted a church in 2015 called Mended, which is a small home fellowship church I recently stepped down from that position to do 4PA, which I'll talk about. The church is still operational, and I'm still involved in it. But in my time with Mended, we as a congregation began kind of exploring some things in town that we wanted to be involved with. And at the top of my list was homelessness. I just, kind of taking care of the most vulnerable within a community.
Matt, did we lose him?
Yeah, did we lose your sound, Joe?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, these headphones sometimes do that. So we as a church, as a congregation, began exploring ways to help with homeless, and it was at the top of my list. And I got connected with a program here in town called Rediscovery, which some of you may be familiar with. And through that process, just really began to learn more about the homeless population. And that kind of led me into where I'm going with 4PA. Nancy, that was kind of an introduction of how I got introduced to homelessness. I don't know where you want me to continue.
No, now tell us about 4PA.
Okay. So as I got connected with Rediscovery, I kind of went on my own personal journey of really not stopping there. I wanted to talk to other people in town that were in this arena. I talked to law enforcement, different social work groups. And I just really went on kind of a 2-year journey of educating myself as much as possible, and also listening to the public, because what was happening was cities like Seattle and Portland around us were having an explosion in the homeless population and having some serious problems. And I kind of heard from the community similar sentiments as far as the community not wanting the homelessness to become such a big problem in our town as well. And I just began putting some pieces together on where did I see gaps, because there are lots of services here in town, like we've kind of mentioned, some amazing services to help people, but there really are some gaps that needed attention. And one of those is definitely housing. And so I decided to formulate a nonprofit organization called 4PA to address really 2 main areas. One of them would be housing, connecting homeless with housing, which I'll talk a little bit about here in a second. But as I talked to the community as well, and the members throughout the community, one of the main concerns was cleanliness and safety of our community and some of these places that have been public spaces who've been really damaged by some of the homeless encampments and that nature. And so I thought, well, we need to get those places cleaned up. And the amazing thing is that, in my opinion, you can clean a city and really do a good service within a city and take care of people at the same time. I never really saw those things as mutually exclusive. So I wanted to go to some of these areas in our community that have been damaged, engage with people, really kind of help the 2 worlds coexist, as far as cleaning up public spaces that have been abandoned, with abandoned encampments, but then engaging with people to try to help them transition into more stable housing. So 4PA is doing 2 things. If you guys have seen anything in the newspaper or social media, we're doing a lot of cleanup right now, but in the background, we're working really hard on some creative solutions for housing. I'm pulling on some of my contacts within the church community, looking at tiny house structures in various locations, because ultimately, when I'm out cleaning, because this is kind of what I do on a daily basis, is I'm out there engaging with the people. And it's really heartbreaking when I talk to somebody and you ask them, hey, why are you here? And they kind of give you their story. Do you have any place else to go? No, I don't have any place else to go. They don't want to go to the shelter for one reason or the other. there literally is no place for them to go. And it's
Joe, I'm going to interrupt you just a second. A couple people are saying they can't hear you very well. Can you boost up your mic?
Yeah, I got a little bit louder there.
Okay,
Um,
thanks.
but ultimately, it's really difficult when you look at somebody and they don't have a place to go. I was just down in Peabody Creek today talking to a young man who one of the neighbors reported that was down there, and he was in the similar situation. He had a few things that were keeping him out of the shelter. He had a pet, but he literally was there just in an emergency situation. But he has no place else to go. And so we're going to be working really hard on this place from the street, between the street and a more permanent shelter. There's this gap that doesn't exist right now, where we need a safe transitional spot, whether it be a tiny structure, whether it be a designated area where people can park cars or pitch tents and get connected with services. These are all things that we're exploring and working on as we're cleaning. Because I don't want the homeless people to get such a bad rap that nobody wants to help them.
Yeah.
And part of what I want to do when I'm out there talking to people is help educate the homeless people, to help them coexist in public spaces, help them be engaged in a community, help them find self-worth again. There is a lot that you can do with a one-on-one conversation with somebody, and kind of nurturing them along a path towards kind of recovery. So, I mean, that's one of the goals in this whole thing, is really to get people stabilized.
Great.
So, yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So you have a bunch of volunteers that are working with you. Is that basically to clean up the camps?
Yeah, so we actually have a few employees of the organization, and then a handful of volunteers, and we're expanding our volunteer team currently. And yes, we're cleaning up abandoned homeless encampments, because there are a lot of them currently, and they're a big job to clean up. But we're going to spread out from there and utilize most of our future volunteers to do more, I would say, family friendly city type cleanups.
Okay.
Downtown cleanup, waterfront. I'm not pulling a ton of people into the homeless encampment cleanup at the moment, because there's a lot of safety risks involved, and it's a little more serious business. But yeah, we do utilize volunteers.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Sandra, do you have a sense as to what the percentage of homeless people that have mental health problems might be? Or is that something you're not able to determine?
I would say pretty close to 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Diagnosed, undiagnosed?
I would probably say half and half diagnosed, half undiagnosed.
Okay. Yeah.
That's just a rough estimate, but yeah, it's very interconnected.
And there's a lot of weird stories that, this is for both of you, a lot of weird stories that go around on Facebook and in gatherings about the big Greyhound buses that are coming and dumping off all these homeless people. What can you tell us about that?
I have yet to see that.
Yeah.
And I would love to chat with anybody who has seen that and just see figure out what's going on there. But I do meet people who have moved here, but they're coming here via a big bus. I met a guy that came from Indiana, and he heard about this place from the Twilight movies, and him and his girlfriend wanted to check it out. And so they came out here, and now they're stranded. Another person moved here for health reasons, because of like the air quality and the elevation was good for some of his health conditions. And he came from like Kentucky. So it's just, everyone's story is so unique and it can't be lumped into a Greyhound bus.
Yeah.
Joe, any comment?
Yeah, I can speak to my experience as well. Just engaging with people is that I'd say there is some people that come from out of town, but they generally are kind of passing through. They don't stay for long periods of time. I would say 9 out of 10, probably nine out of 10 people that I talk to that are homeless on the streets currently have ties to or are from the greater Port Angeles.
Right. Yeah, that was certainly my experience as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So we really haven't identified what some of the reasons are for homelessness. So both of you jump in on that. What we know, mental health is one of the biggies. What are some other reasons that people become homeless?
Joe, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I
went
mean,
first last
interesting.
time.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I think it can be a perfect storm of things, as far as, COVID certainly hasn't helped. A lot of what's going on with housing prices increasing has not helped. I remember my friend Amy from Rediscovery made a comment one time that she was kind of pinpointing a common thread throughout much of homelessness is loss of something in a person's life. I mean, you could fill in the blank, whether it be a loved one or a job, but some element of loss. In my experience, also, addiction is a huge part of at least the younger population that I'm encountering. Some of them actually have family in town, but because of their addiction, they're not allowed to come home. And that boundary has been put up by family members. So addiction, I think, is a big player as well.
Sandra, anything to add?
I would say those exact same things, and trauma. Trauma would be the one thing that I would add, which is the loss. The loss is traumatic, and that feeds the addiction, and the addiction feeds the homelessness, and it all is a vicious cycle. And I did want to add one more thing I want to jump back real fast, talking about folks from out of town. A lot of times when I encounter someone from out of the area, I will ask them if they want to go home to where they're from. I'll always ask them, where are you from? That's how a lot of the conversation starts. And if they want to go home, our program will pay to get them there. So we try to get as many people back to where they have somewhere to go that's stable, if we can. And we always verify that first too. We don't send somebody into back to Minnesota where they don't have a place to live either. But we do try to get them back home, and our grant funds allow us to pay for that.
Ooh, that's great. Yeah. What about kids? I mean, dependent kids. Are you seeing any of those kids on the street? Are the homeless people putting them in schools, or they come to a homeless situation because kids are in foster care or because there aren't any? So talk a little bit about where do kids fit into this?
Do you mean kids that are not with their parents?
Right. I mean dependent kids. We know that there's a fairly reasonable population of homeless teenagers that for one reason or another cannot live in their home. But what about kids that are 6, 7, 8, 10 years old? Are you seeing any of them with a single parent on the street?
Not on the street, maybe in a car, living in a car, or living in an RV that's not connected to the proper hookups. But there is a few more resources available for people with children. Like you said, Nancy, the family shelter, that's been a great resource for our team, as far as referring people there and getting them into shelter. And there's a couple more housing options for people with families through the coordinated entry. So with those added resources, it helps, which thank goodness, we don't want to really see anyone on the street, but we really don't want to see children on the street.
Right.
There
Right.
was one family that I was attempting to outreach for quite a while that really didn't want to talk to any of our team members, or didn't want help connecting to services, was clearly living in their vehicle with 2 small children, I would say 2 and 3. And they first kind of came on my radar because they did access the food bank. And so tried to connect with them numerous times, and every time they just kind of shut me out. And I always wondered, I wonder what they're going to do, you know? And somebody told me not too long ago that they did find housing in Squim. And so thank goodness they're safe, but there are those folks that just don't want any help. And I don't know if it's pride that gets in the way, or if it's fear of like someone like myself working for a community organization and reporting things to Child Protective Services.
Mhm.
I think that, you know, sometimes they just don't want the help, and that
Right.
is a scary thing, especially when there are children involved, you know?
Yeah, I was going to ask that question. There's, you know, with all the resources that we do have in our community, why are the homeless reluctant to accept the services that are offered? I know we have to be a little bit careful. A lot of folks don't want to go to Serenity House.
Yeah.
They don't want to go into a shelter. And, you know, I think we know some of those reasons that we won't go into right now. But what are some other reasons you hear, Joe?
You know, like I mentioned before, the addiction is really a driving force behind, I think, why a lot of them won't choose shelter or other agencies, is because once you head down that path, then you're responsible. Then you have to make a choice. There's rules involved. There's, you know, and unfortunately, addiction is so powerful that I think it overtakes that part of the brain that would maybe lead someone towards help. And so that's a big player from what I see. You know, there's also a handful of people that are not using at the moment. I encountered a couple the other day. They actually have an income on disability, but it's just not enough to afford stable housing. And it's a married couple, you know, they're not into going to the shelter and being around other people. And then there's also a few that are kind of recluse, you know, they're just a little more comfortable in their own skin, away from people, down on the waterfront trail or the beach, in the shelter, in an environment of kind of overstimulation is not the place for them. They would not thrive in that atmosphere.
And they really form their own community and seem to address their own needs at times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see and hear a lot of that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sandra, what really are the mental health resources available to someone with no money, no phone? What can you do for them?
So in my program, we can help them, you know, with the phone piece and getting insurance, and if they want to, applying for disability income, or searching for a job, or going back to school. But as far as mental health services, they can come through Peninsula Behavioral Health's Access Department and complete a mental health intake, which would give them the diagnoses. And then the therapist that's assigned to them can begin therapy sessions to treat those diagnoses. And at the same time, connect with nursing and we have a doctor here, a prescriber. So get their meds, you know, prescribed if that's something that they're interested in. And we have a pharmacy here, so they can fill their medication prescriptions right here. And we also have a primary care provider, so they can see the other doctor for other physical things that they may have going on. And then they can also connect with case management at the same time, which will help them meet some of those other more paperwork type needs, not mental health treatment needs. And then as long as they're enrolled clients in our services, they can access our Horizon Day Center, which is open Monday through Friday and has laundry and showers there. They do breakfast and lunch, and they have meaningful activities and recovery support stuff going on. They have computers there and music and games, karaoke machine even. So that's a really good place for people to stay connected too. And who, maybe just don't feel like they feeling really alone or depressed, and kind of, work on the therapy piece with their therapist, and then maybe go to Horizon on a daily basis and have some lunch with some people, participate in a group session. There's lots of options, lots of good programs here.
I understand that Peninsula Behavioral has just purchased the Allview Motel.
Yeah.
Is that for homeless? Tell me about it.
Yeah, so they purchased the Allview Hotel to be permanent supportive housing is what we call it. And I think it's going to be 22 units.
Wow. Good.
Yeah, so that's a really good amount of housing. That's 22 people that soon will get shelter, and it's super exciting. And along with the housing comes mental health services and, often check-ins, whether it's daily or weekly or twice a day, whatever that looks like for the individual. Our care here is very individualized. So it really just depends what that person needs. And sometimes people need that, and that's okay. We just work with them to figure out what works best for them in their situation and try to meet that need. So yeah, the Allview Motel project is so exciting. I think that the goal is early spring. They're remodeling right now. And then I'm not sure how they're going to, because obviously those 22 spots, we could fill that up over and over and over. I don't know how they're going to decide who gets the spots, but it will be for Peninsula Behavioral Health clients.
That sounds exciting.
Yeah, it is. We also have our Arlene Ingle home. I don't know if you're familiar with that, which is a little bit more intensive housing because it has 24-hour around the clock care there. And 3 meals a day are prepared for those residents. And I think it houses 18 people.
So things are happening.
Yeah, things are happening. It's something towards this housing, the shortage of housing, because like Joe said, there just is literally no place for people to go. And so, we even give out tents and stuff so people have somewhere to lay their head because there's no place to go. And the shelter is not that great. That's the reality. It is not safe there, and it is not a place where I like sending people. It's not my first choice.
Joe, tell us a success story.
Well, success story is
however you want to describe success. I guess.
We're such a young organization. We just launched in October, and so I think success is that the community has embraced us, and we're really drawing eyes on this issue from a different angle, and actually garnering a lot of support, which I think is going to be highly beneficial as we transition into finding housing. Because I think once we get a lot of community business support behind this, we're going to be able to do some amazing things housing wise. Everything inside me thinks that we're going to have some breakthrough in the next year or so, and having places for people to go. So I think that's a win. I do have an idea that if we have time, I'd like to share after questions. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question before we open it up to all these smiley people that are waiting to ask you something. What can we as a church, or what can the faith community do to help both of you?
That is a great question. I think for me, having these discussions is paramount. You know, one thing, I'm just being completely candid, as a pastor. I often got frustrated with the lack of, I don't know, I guess the faith community not being in some of these arenas, that were in, you know, real problems in communities. You know, I'm not, for whatever reason, but I think having discussions like this and kind of getting your hands dirty in a sense and really getting down to the nitty gritty of what's happening is a super valuable way that you can help. And then my ideas along these lines too for churches, and I promise I'll share it before we leave.
Okay. Remind me in case I
Yeah,
say good
not
night,
yet.
folks.
Okay.
Sandra?
Yeah, I agree with what Joe said, you know, having a platform to communicate with you folks and just share about what we're seeing in the community as we are walking around and engaging with these folks. And just remembering that, you know, I think a lot of, I'm not saying that this is true of this group, but the community, you know, is hard on the homeless, and that's
Yeah.
a child,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know. I just think
Yeah.
like, gosh, I have 2 kids and I'm like, gosh, that's somebody's son or that's somebody's daughter, you know, and most of the people I meet don't want to be homeless. They just are stuck, or they don't have the resources or the tools or the wherewithal to get out of it. And so, you know, a smile goes a long way for those folks. And just a hello instead of, you know, walking by them like they don't exist. So I think that just, you know, treating them like humans, I think is the most that we can ask from you guys. And but along the lines of resources that the church could provide, there is a lack of food available in the evening in this community. So the Salvation Army does breakfast and lunch, and then there is no food available from lunch until breakfast the next day. And so if the church maybe did a dinner once a week that could be served, you know, maybe to go or something. I know maybe you don't want groups gathering in the church because of COVID right now, but some sort of like dinner meal would be, I'm sure they would really, really appreciate that, because I know I get really hungry for dinner when I get off of work and I want to eat a ton because I've worked hard all day. And those people experiencing homelessness are working even harder than I am sitting at my desk. You know, they're walking and lugging their stuff around and, you know, working up an appetite. So just having some more dinner meals available would be super
Great. Yeah, I'd like to say that, you know, nobody wakes up in the morning and decides they're going to be homeless.
Right.
It's not a choice.
No.
And you two have given us lots of good reasons why that happens in our very own hometown. So we really thank you. Now you're not dismissed yet. Just stick around. Okay, so it's time for questions, and Pastor Matt will be monitoring those, and he wants you to use the raise your hand motif or whatever that is. So Matt will call on you in the order in which you have raised your hand. Go for it. Who has questions for our guests?
And wait for people to figure that out. So please,
Yeah.
please use that. But Sandra, you mentioned Horizon. Can you explain what that is?
So the Horizon Center is a day center that is ran by PBH staff who are also peers. And folks who are connected to services here at Peninsula Behavioral Health can access the Horizon Center. It's open Monday through Friday from 9:30 to 2:30, and they serve breakfast and lunch there. And they have showers and laundry services, as well as group meeting spaces, and they have leaders who facilitate groups for people to participate in. They do meaningful activities out in the community, and like hikes or bike rides, walks. They did like rock collecting and then rock painting. They have arts and crafts groups. They do a whole bunch of different stuff, and it's really fun over there. And I always thought, oh, if I wasn't in outreach, I want to work at Horizon. And people can kind of just come and go freely as they wish. And they can access the computers there and maybe work on job applications or, whatever it is they want to get on the computer for. There's a pool table there. There's a foosball table there. There's music. It's just kind of like a hangout spot. And it's also a nice place for people to come and get warm too. If they're, living outside, they can come and warm up, and there's always coffee on. People love the coffee, and they make delicious food over there. Sometimes I sneak over there for lunch.
Great, thank you. Keith, you had your hand up. I'll call on you.
Hello, all. I'm the deacon over at St. Andrew's Episcopal up on Park Avenue, and I see some of our other parishioners are here. And I had two questions for Sandra. We have talked about the Laundry Love program in the past, and I see that you have a program in place at Peabody Laundry. Is that one of the places and an opportunity for volunteerism?
I don't know about, I think you could come and join us there, most definitely. And, just engage with us, with the folks there. We don't own the laundromat, and we're just hanging out there with quarters and soap and trying to help people get their clothes washed and dry. And I think that, any of my staff would be more than willing to have you, any of your volunteers join in that. I don't know exactly, like, we're not folding laundry for people or moving it to and from washers and dryers. We're just like putting in the quarters and kind of facilitating that for those that don't have the funds to do so. But I would say you're more than welcome to come and hang out with us.
Cool. And then my other question is with dinner meals that sounds like something we might be interested in.
Wonderful.
And so I'd have to talk to folks, of course, but we like food.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of up on Park Avenue by the high school. So when we did the pop-up warming center, we didn't have a lot of people dropping in on us, though we gave everything we collected for it to Taffy. So we had a huge impact on that project. Is there a place we could collaborate with serving food if we were to put it together?
You would just need a place to serve it, not prepare it?
If everybody agreed with doing this.
I know that on the weekends, some other church groups serve lunches at the Peninsula Behavioral Health parking lot here. So it might be something that could be arranged. It would be outside of our business hours where, the cars are gone, the parking lot's open. We're fairly centrally located. Another thing that we do in the summertime, we do a lunch in the tree park, the Jesse Webster Tree Park, which is another good spot. And we usually get, 60 to 70 people that would come every Friday for that lunch. And if you get the word out, they'll come. They may not make it all the way up to Park Street or Avenue, because that is, uphill and a little bit out of the way. But, if you come down to the park, they'll come for that food.
Yeah. Okay.
Mom's does a lunch, like a soup lunch, I think on one of the Saturdays a month at the tree park too. So it's a common place that folks of the unsheltered population know that they can come there for food. Different organizations are doing food stuff there. And same with
that's the tree park that's out by Eunice.
Yeah, it's right behind Swain's.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know it well. Okay. Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Hi, Andrea.
I have a couple things. One, when I was going to the Baptist church, they used to have meals and we would help once a month. And I know the Lutheran church on Lordson and Lincoln used to do, are they still doing that in the evenings?
I think so. St. Matthew, the Wednesday
Yeah.
night.
Okay. And what about the Methodist Church? Are they still doing that? Do you know?
I don't know about the Methodist Church.
Yeah, because they used to do it. I don't. And I was in the hospital in March, and unfortunately, but anyway, there were two homeless or people that didn't have housing that were staying in the hospital because they didn't want to release them to the streets. And they had some, mental problems and stuff. What can you tell us about that? And the nurses were saying that they're getting funded by the state to have them stay there.
Wow, that's information that I am not aware of.
Okay.
I will share that just today, I received a call from the hospital from one of the social workers who said they had somebody living in the hospital who had some serious health stuff going on. And he was living there for the last 2 to 3 months. Maybe this is the same person or one of the individuals. And they had recently discharged him because he could no longer live there. And he was now staying in their lobby, and they couldn't have him there in the lobby anymore, but he really couldn't leave because he now had to be on oxygen. And you can't, they won't let you be out on the street pulling an oxygen tank around, and you can't get your oxygen delivered when you don't have an address. And so he had kind of just been squatting in the lobby for a couple of days. And so the hospital reached out to me, and we went out and met with this individual today. Well, my team did. I was not able to be there. I had a Zoom meeting. And we worked with him to find out what his goals were. And he actually has some family out of state. So we're working towards getting him back to where he has a sister, which would be great. Or maybe an Oxford house, because what came out of his stay in the hospital was that he was in there so long that he had been clean and sober for about 3 months. So Oxford might be a good transition from that hospital setting into a sober living setting. So we're working on some stuff, but that's about as much as I can speak to that type of situation.
Yeah, because this lady had been there and she wandered the halls at night, and some of the nurses were very patient with her, and you need to go back to your room. But they said, when I talked to the nurses, they said that you can't release, or the hospital can't release somebody if there's nobody to take care of them.
Right. They have to have a safe discharge plan. But then I hear of them releasing people without a safe discharge plan all the time. So I don't.
Oh, she was there, and there was another guy there. So for months. So anyway, thank you.
Interesting.
Paul and Sherry.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So firstly, I'd like to thank you both for sharing your time and your thoughts, and I'm learning a lot. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
The Methodist Church, just FYI, is not open yet for serving meals again, the friendship dinner. But hopefully once the Omicron gets under control, we can start that again.
Okay.
But I guess I'm curious, funding wise, for both of you. Like, I'm assuming, PBH is government funded in some regards, but which sources, and also Joe, your funding. I guess where are you? Where do you get your funds? And I'll let you guys talk.
So we are essentially a crowdsourced organization, kind of a grassroots. I did not want to go the route of begging the government for money or spending hours in my office writing grants. And so I thought, we have a great, generous community. And if everybody chipped in a tiny little bit, they would all have some skin in the game, all have, that sense that they're helping solve the problem. And so we're crowdsourced. So I've asked the community, each household for $10 a month was the pledge that I have put out there to people. And so right now we have over 100 families giving monthly pledges. We've had some really great one-time donations. Because if I can get a consistent monthly pledge amount coming in, then I can budget around that. And I'm happy to say that we're growing. The pledges keep coming in. We're about to hire another employee to run another cleaning route and maintenance route around town. And so it seems to be working. Yeah.
Joe, how do we donate?
You go to 4pa.org, which is the number 4pa.org. You can read more about what we're doing, and there's a big button in the corner that says pledge, and it'll walk you right through the process. Pretty simple.
I've seen it. Thanks.
Oh, I guess it's my turn to talk and answer Paul's questions. Sorry.
Yes, please. Thanks.
So Paul, we have a lot of different funding sources here at Peninsula Behavioral Health, and I'm not even aware of all of them. I know that there's lots of grants, and then there's community donations, and then there's community, like from individuals, and then there's community partner donations too from organizations. But the PATH grant is a federally and state funded grant. So SAMHSA funds a portion of it, and then the state of Washington funds a portion of it under the state's opioid targeted response, which was an effort to combat the opioid epidemic. And then the REAL team is grant funded as well, and it is it's really new, and maybe about a month and a half we've been boots on the ground, so it's very, very, very fresh, and it is in response to the legislature's, well, and the Senate's decision to for the Blake bill, Senate Bill 5476, I think, and that bill said that it was unconstitutional to charge people with drug possession. And when the Senate did that, they had to provide a program or resource for law enforcement because law enforcement can't arrest for that sort of thing anymore. And instead of arrest, this program was developed as a diversion. So it's kind of a law enforcement diversion program. And it's all state funded.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you both.
Nancy, I'll turn it back over to you. We have a couple more minutes left, and I know that Joe wanted to add something too. So
Yes, I promised him. Go for it, Joe.
My brain doesn't stop working. And so I've got more ideas than I got time. And so one of the things that I'm exploring right now is how churches can get involved. And this is kind of a two-parter to the question that was answered earlier. This is the second part. This would be a very practical, hands-on way. I talked about having this gap in location for people to go to. And there's been a lot of communities that have explored these tiny home villages, like kind of Sarge's house, and then Pennies for Quarters for the homeless vets here in Port Angeles is, on its way to becoming operational. And those sorts of programs, they work well because they're based around community. That's a vital element in kind of recovery with people. But the challenge is that I have found is property and location. It's a very difficult to find a big chunk of property. It's expensive. There's all kinds of permits and zoning laws and you name it. I mean, all kinds of hoops to jump through, which, can be done eventually. But if I can't get something done in a couple of weeks, I start to get antsy. So I'm always looking at different ways. And so I came up with the idea of having churches offer space, because you figure a church has usually property. Generally, most are paid off. They have buildings, they have facilities. Some have laundry and shower facilities. So my idea is to have each church who's capable adopt a homeless individual. So we would actually have a tiny home structure put on the property that could be movable in proximity to the church. We could paint it. We could make the aesthetic blend in with the church. It wouldn't have to be an eyesore or anything like that. And we would house a homeless person or couple who was vetted by maybe one of our local agencies like PBH or Rediscovery to enter into that home. And they could have instant access to resources. They could have a church family that could surround them and love on them, provide very practical things for them. They'd have a warm place. Maybe you could set up a curfew if you felt necessary, or make your own kind of rules for the property. Maybe twice a week, they could have access to a kitchenette or facilities within the church. But really, the church could envelop them and do what churches do best, is love on people and create community. And I figured if I just got one church to say yes to this idea right now, we could pilot that program. And then if it was successful, we could replicate it because there's lots of churches in town that have lots of vacant parking lot space. And I just really think it could be a huge statement and a real practical way that we can get on top of the housing problem. So anyway, that's my idea. If you want to explore it, you can always contact me.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, you bet.
Well, we're about done for tonight, but we are not done. Next week, we have law enforcement with Sheriff Bill Benedict, and a member of our own congregation, Lindsay Monahan, will be with us. She's the doctor in charge of jail health services, and a couple other deputies, Brian King, and what's the other guy's name, Don? Don something. I can't remember. Anyway, law enforcement next week. The following week, Rediscovery Program and Lutheran Community Services. And the last week of February is our very own Kate Decker, who is Dexter, who is the mayor of Port Angeles. So stick with us. You can go and eat and do your chores in between times, but we expect you back next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Joe and Sandra. You were great.
Ooh.
Okay. Sorry.